Hey art friends, in this video we're going to draw Sally from The Nightmare Before Christmas. I hope you're going to follow along. It's going to be a lot of fun. Let's get started. For this lesson we're using Canson marker paper to draw on. I love using this paper, especially with alcohol-based markers. We also have a bunch of colors. I'm going to list these out so that you can get them ready for this lesson. First, with our colored pencils, we're using white, 70% gray, black, non-photo blue, and also this dark green. And the brand is Prismacolor, but you can use whatever color pencils you have and just pick similar colors. The 70% gray we're using to draw the main shapes with. Then with our markers, we have CG1, this is a light gray, 131, kind of a light pink, 33 yellow, 2 is a dark red. We also have number 1, which is even darker. Then we have 182 light blue, 59 light green, 43 dark green, 341 is a dark pink. Then we have CG7 and 312 blue. Also, don't worry about picking the exact same colors if you don't have this set. You can pick similar colors with your own marker set. Let's first use our gray color pencil to draw the basic shapes of Sally. Don't worry about making these lines perfect. We can even make them messy. We're just trying to get those shapes exactly how we want them before we use our markers. Let's start by drawing her head. I'm going to draw a circle towards the top of my paper because she's really tall. So we have room for her whole body. Then we're going to draw her neck. Let's see, about that long. She has a really long neck. I'm just drawing a straight line down. And then we're going to draw her shoulders that come out this way. And her shoulders come just past her head on each side. Then we're going to draw her body. And we're going to draw diagonal lines coming into her waist. And her torso, or the top of her body, is kind of short. Then her hips come out on each side, and then they come back together for her dress, coming down, and her legs are really long. So here's the end of her dress. We could even curve it this way instead of straight across to make it more 3D. Then we're going to draw her legs coming down. So we got two legs. I'm just drawing straight lines for the middle of her legs, and then her feet will point out on each side. We'll make these thicker, but let's come up here and draw her arms. We're going to draw this one coming down and bending right at her waist. Then we're going to draw her elbow coming up. This is her wrist, and then her hand is going to come right to her neck or her shoulders. Then on this side, we could draw her arm coming down. Here's her elbow. Then we'll draw it coming down further, and here's her wrist is maybe a little higher, right about here, and then her hand is going to be here. Her hair comes down from the side of her head. She has really long hair. I think I'm going to make her head just a little smaller. So this will be her hairline, but inside of this is her head. So we're going to draw it a little smaller. We'll come around like this, so it comes in on the sides and also the top. And then her chin could come down and kind of create a point right where her neck, that neckline is for her chin. Now let's make her arms and her legs thicker. So her sleeve is going to come out, and then we'll come back in. Let's do the same thing on the other side. Curve out and then back in. Then we'll draw her arm. So this is the out, we'll use this line. I thought maybe that's the center, but we'll use that as the outside line. This is the inside line. Then we'll draw her arm, curving up. Her elbows down here, we could draw a curve and then come up to her wrist. Then her hand, we'll just draw the general shape. We'll draw a curve coming out on each side of her wrist. And then this is where her knuckles are. And then her fingers right here. So we're just drawing those basic shapes. Don't worry about adding too many details like fingers and also the stitching. We're just drawing the main shapes. Okay, let's draw her other arm. Over here, we're going to draw the inside line. We'll come down to her elbow and kind of curve out a little bit for her forearm. Then we'll draw the outside line coming down to her elbow, and we can draw that curving down to her wrist. Let's do the same shapes for her hand. Curve out, on both sides. This is her knuckles. And then we'll draw her fingers. And this is her thumb. We'll just draw it right here. She's looking really cool. And I love that we start out by drawing kind of a skeleton or a stick figure just to get the length and the proportions right. And then we can add the details or the main shapes after that. Okay, now let's draw her legs. I might draw her dress coming up a little bit higher so that her legs can be longer. So now we're going to draw her calves coming down to her socks. So I'm going to draw curves coming down and make her legs a little bit thicker. There we go, on each side, and then her socks down here at the bottom. Then we can draw her socks, and then we'll draw our shoes. We'll just draw a pointy letter U's pointing out on each side. See how that first center line goes right through the middle of that shape. She also has little heels we could add on the back. Now we're going to draw her face. We can draw a little plus right in the middle to give us the center of her head. Let's draw her nose a little bit lower than center. And we could turn this into a little triangle shape for the shadow. Then let's draw her eyes. They're really big. We're going to draw a circle and a circle to match on the other side. Then we could draw her eyelids. We'll draw little curves towards the top of those circles. And then her mouth and lips. And she has stitches going really far past her lips. So we're going to draw this really big smile, but her lips are going to be right here, smaller, right in the middle. Then she has the really small pupils we're going to add in the center of her eyes. Also, I think her hair comes up a little higher, so we could change that. Now that I'm looking at it, we got all these shapes in here. I think we can make her hair come up a little higher, past that original circle that we drew. And then, oh, let's make her neck thicker too. Now it's really starting to look like her. We can also draw a V right here for her dress. And we can also draw the basic patterns or patches on her dress. So let's first draw a diagonal line coming down the middle. Let's go all the way to her hip. We could even go a little past her hip. Then we're going to draw a diagonal line coming down. Then we'll draw a diagonal line going this way. Then we can draw another diagonal line right here, curving down to the bottom of her dress. Oh, we could also draw another curve going this way. She also has a square patch or diamond right here on this patch on her dress. Oh, and one more diagonal line here. And there we go. We finished drawing all the main shapes using our pencil. Now we can switch to our markers. We're adding the first layer with our markers. This is just to color everything in solid. This part I'll speed up, so pause the video and take time to color your drawings. The first layer is finished. Now we're ready to add a second layer. We're going to start with our CG1. This is a light gray, and we're going to use this to add shadows. Let's first start under her neck. I'm going to draw or color in a little shadow to make it look 3D, or that her face is in front of her neck. Then we can also add a shadow next to her hand that's on her body. I'm going to also add this shadow underneath her sleeves and coming down her arm. We could also add little wrinkles on her dress with shadows. Then let's come down here and we can add a little shadow underneath her dress on her legs. Also, the bottom of her dress and her sleeves are tattered, and we've just drawn them straight across. So we can add these shadows more as a zigzag line going into the dress. And I'm gonna add a shadow on the side of her socks. If you want, you can also go back over for a third layer and darken in the shadows. I'm also gonna add a shadow on her arm and also coming further down her leg. I'm also gonna add a shadow coming down the side of her dress. There we go. Now let's switch to our blue. This is a darker blue, 312, and I'm gonna use this to add her eyeshadow. Also, let's switch to a darker red. This is number 1. And we're gonna add texture to her hair. So this is also acts as shadows in between the different hair strands and also underneath her head. So we can just draw lines coming down to give her hair some texture. Also a shadow. I'm gonna add a solid shadow right here and also down her neck. We can also give her a part and some texture lines coming out of her part. Oh, also let's make her hair longer. Maybe you can see it coming right in between her arms and her hips. Let's switch back to our darker blue, 312. I'm gonna add this shadow that's underneath her nose using the same color. And then we can also draw it coming up the side. Oh, maybe we can switch to a gray too. I'm gonna put a gray, the light gray marker on top of that shadow. We can also add a little shadow on the left side of her nose. And let's also add a shadow coming down the side of her head. Next, let's switch to our black colored pencil and make sure you have a really sharp point, and we can add eyelashes. They look like little letter U's. Now let's switch to a blue colored pencil. This is called non-photo blue, and we can add stitching on her head. Let's first draw a scar or a seam right here. We'll also add the little stitches going across. Let's add the stitches on her cheeks. I'm using blue so that it's not too dark, especially on her face. Then on her neck, let's switch to our gray colored pencil, and we can make the seams a little darker with the stitching also. So we'll draw stitches on her neck. Then let's come down here to her wrist, draw a line across and stitches going the other way. You could also draw a seam on her arm. And there's a couple seams over here on this arm too. And don't forget the stitches on her legs. Next, let's add the patterns to her dress. I'm switching to a dark green colored pencil, and we're gonna add spirals to this patch. On this next patch, let's add big circles. We'll add 2. This one's kind of squished because it's going around her hips. Then we can use that same dark green and add curves going through the patch. On this patch, we can add lines coming down. And on this patch, let's use our dark gray and we can add a crisscross pattern. So we'll draw the lines going around her dress this way. And then we can draw them coming down this way. On the next patch over here, we'll just add little dots. Up here on her sleeve, we can add lines coming down too. Now let's use our white colored pencil to add some highlights. We'll first add a highlight on the left side of her hair, coming down. We can also add white on the side of her head too. Then let's come down to her hand and arm. It doesn't show up as well on the light blue. Let's also add some highlights coming down her dress. I'm not pressing very hard because this is fabric. Then we can add a little shine on her shoes. Now let's switch to our black colored pencil. We're gonna use this to sharpen up some of the edges also create that tattered look on the bottom of her sleeves and dress. We can also use the black colored pencil to add stitches in between all of the patches. Now this part we'll fast forward again, so remember to pause and take that extra time that you need. And we did it! We finished drawing and coloring Sally. She turned out so cool, all colored in with all the details. Now you can pause the video to match the same coloring and even add those extra stitches to each of the patches on her dress. Remember to add crisscross and also change the stitches so they don't all look exactly the same. And remember, it's okay if your drawings look different than mine. The most important thing is to have fun and practice. I'm sure your drawings turned out really cool. And I hope you had a lot of fun following along with me in drawing Sally. And we'll see you later, art friends. Goodbye.